At the start of last week, Cardano, along with the rest of the crypto space, took a devastating sell-off, with altcoins dropping as low as 60–70% from their highs back in November. Cardano itself dropping as low as 50 cents on a wick, but quickly recovering back up to 70, where it's currently trading. This has left the broader crypto space wondering, where is crypto headed? Are we going to see more big sell-offs? Are we going to see nothing happening? Or are we going to see a strong recovery and we move into our bull run like a lot of people have hoped for at the start of this year? In this video, we're going to talk about what might happen based on what's happened before. And now if you watched the last video, you'll know that we did talk about a possibility of this sell-off. In the last video, we were trading similar to these lows here, and I said we might see the price trade sideways, or we might see it sell off strongly. And the reason I said sell off strongly was because I spent the whole video comparing October 2018 to April 2020, this time frame, this 66-week time frame, to October of 2023 to November of 2024, this 60-week time frame. And I made my case as to why I think they are more or less the same time frame. We get a low that we move up from, we put in a lower high, we then put in a second higher high 12 weeks later. Here we get the same thing. We have a low, we put in a high, 12 weeks later, we put in a higher high. And after that, we trade down for a very long time. This first, not the first cycle, sorry. The base case that we're comparing to, we saw Cardano trade down for 25 weeks before it finally put in a low, which we marked with the orange circle. Here, this cycle, we saw 21 weeks. So again, very similar time frames from tops to bottom. The only different outlier that I made my case for was the COVID move. Here we had 12 weeks where we moved up and then we moved down and put in a low. This was, in my opinion, and I think that a lot of the world would agree, this was all COVID related. We got the start of this rally. COVID caused it to sell off and we put in a lower low. Here we never got that lower low, but we never got the rally either. But we still got the same time frame. And to me, that suggested that that 12–13 weeks that we got last cycle was basically the same, but there was no catalyst to bring it up and there was no catalyst to bring it down. Once that 13–12 week time frame was over, we then got a strong rally from this purple low, and then that's what we got from the purple low 13 weeks after this. And we got a really nice bull run. Cardano did a 4x, roughly. Cardano puts in a high, and then after that, it slowly trades down, putting in lower highs and putting in lower lows. And of course, recently putting in a much lower low. But we spoke about this possibility because last cycle, we saw the exact same thing happen. If you measure from the high to the low that Cardano was at, you can see it dropped a total of 51%. And if you take it from wick to wick, which is probably more accurate, we got a 40% drop from open to close, close to open, whatever you want to call it. And from top to bottom and from peak to trough, we got a 50% drop. This also important to note, okay? When did we get this low? We got this low 9 weeks after the high. So we put in our high here, and 9 weeks later, our low was in. Does anybody want to guess how many weeks this low has been since this high that we put in? Say it with me now. 9 weeks. Would you believe? Which is a crazy coincidence. And we did speak about this, saying potentially if we don't get a strong move by the 9th week, realistically we probably won't get a move. Turns out we got that strong move by the 9th week, on the 9th week, exactly. And then of course we need to measure how far we've fallen. From open to close, we dropped 40%. So basically the same. There's about 3% of a difference there, if you want to be really pernickety. But overall, basically the same percentage. And that's from the current price. This isn't actually the end of the week yet. This could move up, this could move down. It could move closer to the previous cycle percent move. It could move further away from it. Ultimately, it's about the same now. If you want to measure from the high, the wick, to the wick, this is where we get a bit of variation. We've now seen a 60% drop compared to the 50%. So there was definitely more volatility. We saw Cardano have a stronger sell-off compared to its November high. If you actually just want to measure kind of the 2 weeks, this week and this week, that's where the majority of the move was done. We saw 50% of a drop from the previous week to this week. And then if we take a look at what we got last cycle, we can see it's a similar story. we got about 33. So again, a bit less, but ultimately more or less the same move. And again, the same time frame to a T is how long it took for us to go lower. Now, does that mean that this is the low? Not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. We could go lower. And again, I think it's very easy to fall into a trap. We look at these charts and we go, oh, these are so similar. How could you not see these things coming? But they don't always play out the exact same. And I think, like I said, it's a trap to, if you just think blindly that it has to follow the same pattern that it did last time, I think you're cooked, to be honest with you. I think you're going to end up having some huge mistake. It is eerie how similar Cardano has been compared to last cycle, but a lot of altcoins don't look like this. We don't get this extreme similarity with a lot of other altcoins. Even Bitcoin, we don't see similarities like this over the 4-year cycle to this degree. And that's why in my brain, nothing good can last forever. I feel like this pattern is ready to break at any moment. But while it's still working, we might as well get as much use out of it as possible. So again, what happened last cycle? Zoom in quickly. We can see that from the low, it took us another 8 weeks before we saw a really strong green week, and we moved back up to the previous November highs. If you want to put 8 weeks across from the current week that we've had, puts you at the end of March, beginning of April, basically. That would be, in my opinion, when the bull run might start. Because there's a famous saying in crypto, sell in May, go away. I think it's in the stock market as well, to be honest with you. I think it's over most markets. Sell in May, go away. I think we could see something like that happen. I think we could see another very strong rally, maybe for the whole month of April, maybe up until the middle of May. And then we get a bit of a correction, a bit of a sell-off. Like we often do see with the bull runs, we do see some kind of severe correction after a really strong rally. Like we just saw back in November, we've had a really strong correction. That could definitely be a candidate, and that's when I'd be doubting myself a bit if we didn't see some kind of strong move by April, in my opinion. But ultimately, again, if it is going to follow what happened previously, you're still looking at basically at least 2 months of nothing from now on, of slow trending up. Now, this can be viewed as a good thing and a bad thing. The glass half full is that you now have a lot of time. You have 2 months to get a bit of spare cash and put it into Cardano if you believe it's going to go up, and if that cash is spare cash that can afford to be lost. The glass half empty is, I've got to wait 2 months before I see any kind of gains. It's totally up to you. I personally would be glass half full, but again, there's no guarantee that that is what happens. That's just what's happened previously. And again, even though it is extremely similar, it could change at any moment. It could stop following this pattern at any moment. Again, we broke above last cycle. It took us 18 weeks to break above this previous high, which is basically 4 months from the high. When did we get our high? In December. Where does 18 months bring us? Again, it is basically the same stat as the high to the low and then the low to the high. It's the same time frame. It's just a different way of, it's just the total, basically. But I do think, to be honest with you, we will see some kind of move. Even if Cardano wants to break away from this pattern now and do something totally different, I still think we will see some kind of a move like this. And in terms of how high we went, if we do measure from this low, I tell you what, we'll call this close here, this close on the week that we put in the low, we'll call this close our current price now. So this was at 9 cents, 10 cents. We're currently at 70 cents. So from this low, Cardano went on to put in a 3,200% move over a 50-week period. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to get something like that. First of all, I don't think we're going to have a bull run this long. I think our bull run has already started, realistically, and this is just a strong correction. I also don't think we're going to get a 3,200% move. I don't think you can get that from a top 10 altcoin. Not in, a $3 trillion market cap of the crypto space. I don't think you can get a 3,000% move. If you want to move up to the previous high for Cardano, which is just above $3, that puts you at a 300% move. So just to remind you, we are very far away from the previous all-time high, which is a good thing. In my opinion, it means Cardano has room to grow from this price. Do I think it will go much higher than this? I don't know. If you want to measure the change from high to high over the cycles, we can see that it's about a 200% increase from the first high to the second high. And this was actually the bull run. This was the bull run in 2018. or sorry, in 2017, we did see the bull run take place at the end of the year. And again, it was a very quick, very sudden move. We had 2 months and we saw crazy price action. This happened from the start of November to the end of December. We might see something similar here. This doesn't have to play out. We might just go sideways. We might continue to go down. I don't know. But going back to the 200% move from high to high, if we give ourselves a 200% move from Cardano's high of about $3, it puts us at around $9. I think it's possible, but that's over a 10x from today's price. That is a tall order, in my opinion, for an altcoin in the top 10 this late in the cycle. Still though, that's what we got last cycle. So that's the information I'm presenting you with. Again, I try to be as unbiased as possible. I just try to tell you what's happened before and what I think might happen. Anyway, moving to the Bitcoin pair. Again, very similar to what we saw last cycle. We get this first move up from a low. We got 130% here. We got 100% here. We got a drop down of 76% afterwards. We dropped down 70%. This is something we always talk about in the videos. The moves that Cardano is making on its Bitcoin pair are diminishing, both up and downward moves, and even in terms of time frame. It took us 59 weeks from this high, basically 60 weeks from this high, to reach the halving. We peaked 59 weeks before. And coincidentally, this is when we also started rallying up. This is when we got the start of our mini bull run, if you will, where we got a 270% move. Here it took us 47 weeks and we got a 200% move. So shorter time frames, shorter moves are what we're getting this cycle. However, there was the other way of looking at it. If you take it from the halving, it was 32 weeks after the halving that we put in this low. It was 28 weeks after the halving when we put in this low on our Bitcoin pair. We came close to revisiting that low. Again, we made this move of 200% up, and then we made a move of 60% down. Last cycle, we made a move of 70% down. So again, is this the low? Is this the diminishing returns? Is this the reduced volatility that we've seen, again, so far from Cardano compared to the last cycle? Is it the same thing? Is it just another case of we're not getting as much? Because that's what we've seen so far. It's taken shorter and it's done less, even though the moves are more or less the same. And even certain price points, we started from basically the same price point. Around 800 Satoshis here this cycle. It was 830 Satoshis last cycle. So we bottomed out at a similar price. We didn't come as low as we did last cycle. But again, that's the reduced volatility. We started from the same point. If we're going to get less of a percentage move, we're not going to reach the lows that we did last time. It's basic math. Again, last cycle, it was 23 weeks after this high that we bottomed out, or 32 weeks after the halving. Here, we're not even 16 weeks in yet. We're actually 9. We've got this low move much quicker, but I would argue this isn't the low for the Bitcoin pair. And I think that is the case. If Bitcoin is going to recover, I think it's going to recover in a much better way than Cardano will in the short term, like we've seen it do so many times. And what's interesting is, here when we got this sell-off, we got a strong sell and then a bit of a consolidation for about 2 months, followed by another strong sell. Here we had, you could argue this is a consolidation, this green week. It's kind of not, but a bit of resistance anyway. We got a bit of resistance and moved up. Then we got a second sell, and potentially we could be down to this second low, which was very close to the low, but we did end up going lower. And how much lower did we go from that low? We dropped 13-14% from this low. If we drop 13 or 14% from this low, it puts us basically where we were at the start here. Now this kind of coincides with last cycle, with the low, or the price that we crossed the halving at was basically the low that we came back down to. Here obviously we're already well below the price that we crossed the halving at. We're actually at it now. So you could argue that case. You could say the low is down to where we crossed the halving at. I don't think that's the case. I think we're going to move lower. And I think we will probably return to these lows here of around sub 500 sats. Again, this is also where our rally started. We started this rally realistically here at the halving. It just coincided with the halving week. We then came back down to that low when we bottomed out. It was basically the same price. We returned to that low. We now look like we could be on course to returning to that low. We've put in our first consolidation. We might be about to see our second consolidation. If we move down the same amount from the low to the next low, like we saw here, where we, again, bit of a consolidation, drop lower, bit of a consolidation, drop lower. The difference in these lows is 14%. If we move 14% from this low, we're now back at where we started, basically, on the Bitcoin pair, which is what happened here. We went back to where we started. That's my take, personally. I think we will probably see that happen. Again, in terms of time frame, we've got plenty of time to see it happen too. Plenty of time. So that will probably be the case. Again, what to expect from Cardano. If we return to these lows, and I'll measure from this low here because that's where we could be headed, that's where I think we're headed, and it's also a price that we've already been to. If we move up to the kind of danger zone, as I like to call it, which is 3,000 sats, that gives you a 500% move. If you remember on the US dollar pair, we talked about Cardano doing a 10x from its current price, over a 10x in fact, up to $9. If Bitcoin is going to 2x from this point on, that means Cardano here will have to do a 10x, a more in fact than a 10x. That does coincide with the US dollar chart, but it also concedes the fact that most likely Cardano is going to put in a lower high on its Bitcoin pair, which I will remind you, it has been doing pretty consistent. Well, not consistently, but there's only 2 data points, but it's been a lower high. I think that's what happens. I think altcoin Bitcoin pairs, they put in lower highs and higher lows. They slowly converge realistically, like a very, very, very slow wedge. I think that's where Cardano BTC is headed. I think that's where all alt BTC pairs are headed ultimately. Again, if we just quickly line the peaks up so that we have an idea. If we do reach this high of 3,000 sats, or say that we get our peak some point before the end of 2026, and we're going to assume that it's going to follow this trend, it's going to tag this trend, and that's going to be the high. If you want to say we get our peak in May or end of April, you're looking at a price of 4,400 sats, which means Cardano has to do very well against Bitcoin. And you're talking about like a $20 Cardano at this point here, at the high. If you think we'll get a 2017 end of year peak, we'll go to beginning of January of 2026, you're still at about 4,200 Satoshis. Now, from this low, if we bring it up, it is about a 70% move. It is a bit more realistic. It is possible. I think it can be done. And again, a 14x from Cardano's current price of 70 cents, you are still looking at a $20 Cardano. I don't know if that's possible. Again, we're talking about an altcoin that's in the top 10. It's up to you though. I feel like I've waffled for too long. I just wanted to make these points. To quickly summarize, I think we're going to see a lower high on the Bitcoin pair for Cardano when it decides to peak out. I think we're going to return to this low here that we started up from. And I think on the US dollar chart, we are probably going to peak out at around $9. And that's based on a few things. But ultimately, I think the most obvious or easy to follow indicator is that it's a 200% move from the previous peak. There's a case to be made that we get diminishing returns. And so that instead of a linear 200% increase from peak to peak, we see some kind of a decrease. Maybe we move only 150% up, and that puts us at somewhere around $7. I don't know. Ultimately, I'm not holding Cardano after realistically $6. I'm definitely not holding it if it gets close to $9. Not a chance. It's up to you what you decide to do with your own money. But hopefully you found this video interesting. If you did, please leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike too. That's totally fine. Comment down below if you think I missed anything or if you want me to cover another altcoin. And yeah, thanks very much guys. Take care and peace.